hand it over to Lindsay Walsh.
Hi, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us for our monthly webinar here at Tidestone Solutions. We are a Dynamics GP partner based in Portland, Maine. We have clients around the country. We've been doing this for over 20 years, specializing in business process. So we're not just a GP software vendor. What we really like to do is have long relationships with our customers so that they're able to improve their internal processes by using the software, and we help them with productivity tools and other solutions, integrated products, and any solution that really helps them to streamline and build efficiency and therefore increase their profit and reach their next goal. We help our clients with software selection. We do custom reports, whether that's Excel, SQL services, whatnot. We help with data conversion, new implementations of software, and again, we love refining business process with our clients. That's the fun part of what we do. So what I'd like to do is, again, welcome you to this month's webinar. We'll be covering accounts receivable month-end processes, and our solutions specialist, Alicia Berglund, is here to present on that topic. So I'll hand it over to you now, Alicia.
Great. Okay, so thank you all for coming. And I noticed that a lot of you have been on these webinars in the past. I see a few new names. Welcome. We will again present and then open it up for a Q&A, or you can send a chat message to me, and I'll try to notice that and cover that while we're in that area. So without further ado, we'll get started. So the agenda for today is just going through some of those items that you may or may not already be doing as part of your AR month-end process and how GP can help you with that. One is a checklist that we'll look at that you can customize to track what needs to be done in your business, the frequency, and then it also tracks the date that that was completed and by whom. It tracks the GP user. The next is we'll go through posting, what you need to make sure that you have posted for batches and what impacts accounts receivable, what modules you need to be looking at. The aging is also another month-end process that if you're running the aged trial balance, that also ages out all of your balances. So if you're looking at inquiry screens, you don't have to worry about running the separate process, which is an aging, and we'll take a look at that together. Paid transaction removal, scary name, but it's not necessarily what you think. If you're keeping history in receivables, the process paid transaction removal simply moves fully applied documents from an open status to a historical status. Now, if you don't have it marked to retain history, it would remove those documents, and we'll take a look at where's the setting to ensure that you're tracking history and what the process is to move them from open to historical and some of the benefits around running that procedure. GP has functionality to help you assess finance charges for past due balances on your receivables. It also allows you to track and calculate commissions on sales and how that works with generating a report for paying your employees, whether it's based on sales in the sales module or sales that have already been received payment against them. We'll look at a tool that is available to you that allows you to reconcile your AR subledger to the general ledger control account. It's a nice tool that helps to eliminate the old manual tick and tying of eyeballing all of the details in each subledger to the general ledger to identify where there might be a problem and how you can identify those transactions. We'll take a look at creating customer statements. There's a few different formats that you can use. You can print them to letterhead or add your logo, or you can email them directly from GP. So there's some options there. And then finally, we'll look at how to prevent users from posting to the subledger after you've created your financial reports for the month. So if you've had in the past, you generate all your financials and you distribute, and you go and regenerate those reports and some of the totals are different, there is a process that you can prevent that from happening in GP. So we'll take a look at all of that. So that's the agenda, and now we'll just jump right into the demo. And I am demoing in a 2010 environment. Very few people are on 2013, so I thought to stay in a familiar environment might be a good idea for today. And I'm just going to expand this a little. So the first item on our agenda spoke about checklists. And you can find checklists for sales under your sales area page, routines, and checklists. So I'm just going to click on the checklists option there. And you can see that it's defaulting to the receivables module because I accessed it through the sales area page. There are checklists for other modules as well pertaining to sales. There's checklists pertaining to purchasing and financial as well, but we won't see them in this window because we're just looking at sales module specific checklists. So if we look at the receivables module, we can see there's a frequency of month end. There are also other frequencies that you can use. There's a daily, a payday, a period end, and month end. Sometimes those are interchangeable for businesses. Sometimes they're different. There's a quarter end, a fiscal year, a calendar year, and then there's one that's custom, a user defined, where you can set up all of the items that you want to display in the checklist. Now the benefit of the checklist is that you can put in your company's business routine for month end. What are the steps that you take each month to close out your receivables? And so it comes with some default options here. And what's nice about these options is that if I were to process any of these steps by coming to this checklist, it will update this routine with the date, time, and the user who completed this. So we'll get to that. But in this default, it has all of those processes that we've talked about doing. There's a few that aren't here, and we can add those. So if I were to like this list and just wanted to add to it, perhaps I want to add commissions. I can click Add and type in what the title will be. And there is already one there. But if I were to say commissions, I can go to the actual GP window that is necessary for running that commissions report. So very easily I can add anything to this list. Perhaps it's something that's not in GP. You can set it up as an external task and add it to your checklist. So if I were getting ready to close my month, maybe I'm ready to run my aging, I can simply double click on this routine and it opens the appropriate window for what I want to do. And we'll come back to this. And once I close out of that window, you can see here it updated this with the date, and this is sample data, so my system date is 4/12/2017, the time, and who the user was that completed that. If I highlight a line, I can modify or delete or reorganize any of these tasks. So the checklists can be very helpful. And you can see they have fiscal year end, calendar year, not a whole lot to do in receivables at year end. And a user defined, perhaps you want to start from scratch and create your own. Maybe there's a daily checklist you want to have in there for new users. So if we look at the month end, we have this checklist available to us. If I wanted to just clear this all out, I can click Revert, and it will clear out the entry on the top line and set it back to 0. Now you can continue to use this checklist and it will update, so if you're using it each month, you can see each time you go in it will update to the date that you've actually gone into this line item. Okay, so those are the checklists, and again you have a receivables checklist. Maybe there's some different processes you want to do to run at month end for sales order processing specifically. You could add those to this list. Okay, so that's our checklist. The next item on the list is that you want to ensure that you post all of your sales batches, including cash receipts, invoices, finance charges, all those things. And we'll get to finance charges, but let's just take a look at what the things are that you can post in AR. You can see you have up here sales batches. If you're using sales order processing, you're going to see all of your different sales batches. If you're using cash receipts, you're going to have cash receipts and credit memo type transactions in your receivables batches. So I can see different batches than the sales batches in this window. If I wanted to see all of the transactions in one window, Series Post can help me with that. And you can see all of the batches are here. And you can mark them to post. Whoops, let me get that back. Here we go. So you can see there are some batches here from sales transaction. There's a cash receipt batch with no transactions, my nice sample data. And you can see there's other batches available that you could post right from this window just by clicking on the checkbox and clicking Post up here. If you have this many batches, I would not recommend clicking Mark All, because chances are you'll either have too many transactions and it will really bog down GP, or you'll get some errors in some batches and it will be difficult to identify which batches went through and which did not until the very end. So the posting series sales series posting will show you that everything has been posted or what is available to be posted. Okay, so let's come out of there and let's go back to routines, and we touched on aging very quickly. Aging is a process that's been around in GP and other systems for years, because it would typically in old legacy systems you would have to click a button to age your receivables before you started your new month, because what it would do is it would look at the invoice date, the payment terms, and then place those balances in the appropriate aging buckets. With GP, if you're running age trial balance reports periodically, that report runs this process already. It's not very often that a business needs to come to this window and specifically run the aging process. So if part of your month-end routine is to run a historical age trial balance, it's already performing this step. So you can identify what the aging date is that you want to use, and I can just put it back to March here. And it will automatically generate a report unless you select no report here. So I'm just going to ask for a summary report. And I can order this by customer ID or by name, some of the options that you would get in the age trial balance report window. So if I click process here, what it's doing is it's aging all of those balances, moving them out to the appropriate buckets, as I refer to them, and generating this report. Again, you have an option to not print the report if you don't want it. This is just a summary report showing the customer and what the total due is over here. Now the scariest part, I think, in GP when I talk to customers or GP users is the paid transaction removal. Really scary name. Because if you're not tracking history, it really will remove documents. So let's just go quickly over to Setup, and I will show you where you want to mark to retain history. Okay, so when we look at this, I went into Setup on the area page, Receivables, and Options. And you can see down here we are tracking all sales history. We're keeping history. If this were unmarked and we ran the paid transaction removal, then it would actually remove those transactions. If this is marked, it simply moves them from open to history. Okay, I have a question about the checklist. The checklist does not keep a history. It just shows you the last date and user that completed the task. All right, so this is the setup that you want to ensure is marked. And we'll go back to paid transaction removal. So in this window, you can specify a range for running this process. Customer ID, name, or type of customer. I'm just going to leave it at customer ID, and I'm going to select all, but I could just select one customer and select a range or enter a range. I'm just going to keep it to all. And the class ID, I could specify which class ID to run this transaction removal for. And down below there's some cutoff dates. We have some check boxes on the left that if we did not want to move check history to check open records to history, we could uncheck that box and it would not look at any payments. Here it's NSF, and the cutoff for NSF, void, waived, and paid transactions are determined by the date in this field here. Checks, I typically would give it a little more time to ensure that the bank has communicated back to you if there's any problem with a check that you've tried to deposit. Because once you have moved these transactions to history, it's a little difficult to unapply a record or to process an NSF. It cannot be in a historical status to process an NSF. It needs to be an open. So for NSFs, you'd want to make sure that that date is in the history enough and not out to the future so that you're unable to use the other functionality. And so I have a question back here on the aging. The aging setup is also under receivables. And this determines what your aging buckets are. And hopefully I answered Andy's question. So when I run that aging, it's going to look at these aging periods. And let me just get back to my paid transaction removal. And typically this process is run monthly around the time that you're going to be running customer statements. Maybe you don't want to show all of the data on the statement. It could get very long if you have a lot of transactions within a month. You could run this process to clean it up and put things in history, and that way on your statement you could just choose to print open balances only. And so again, to reiterate on here, the NSFs, you want to be careful of the dates so that you can actually use the functionality in GP to process a check that has insufficient funds. And here, if you have a check that's applied incorrectly, you want to have some time to reapply that to the appropriate invoice. And so once you're done with this, you can print a register, I would say, to screen. Whoops, I must have left that checkbox. So click Process. We'll just print this to screen so that you can take a look at what that report typically looks like. And where this is a sample company, there's a lot of data. So what it's telling you is, for all of these transactions for Aaron Fitz, they were fully applied, so I'm moving them to history. And I haven't found it to be a really helpful report, but you may. And so you can print it to screen and see what it looks like. You can see this sales document and this payment went to history. And so that's the report that you would see. Okay, so let's move on to another routine. And you'll notice a lot of these things we're talking about are on that sales area page in the routines section. So it's easy to find them. So finance charges, if you assess finance charges on past due invoices, this tool can be really helpful. It will go out and look at balances based on what you set as the parameter and calculate the finance charge based on the setting on the customer. So you could have on a customer, let's just pop over to a customer really quickly. In the customer setup, if you're not familiar with this, in the options area, you tell the system what is the finance charge percentage going to be, or what is the amount going to be. So you can have finance charges determined across the board for your customers. You know, maybe you have A-level customers where you don't charge as high a finance charge, and maybe there's other customers you charge a little more. You can definitely toggle this by customer. And a lot of ways to make that easier can come through using the class ID. On the class ID that's assigned to customers, you can also set a default finance charge. So if your finance charge is 1.5% across the board, very easy to add to the class. You set up a new customer, assign them to the class, and that finance charge percentage is automatically associated with that new customer. So if we go back to that finance charge window, we have the option to run this for a specific group of customers or a specific class of customers. I'm going to run it for all account types, and I'm going to print a register. And down here, the minimum I want to charge on a finance charge is $2. And I don't want it to look at anything under $50. And when I ask the system to assess finance charges, I want anything 91 to 120 and older. So anything over 91 days will get assessed a finance charge. So you have control on what balances are going to get assessed a finance charge. So if I click Process here, so I'm getting a couple of error messages because I have a sample company. So I'm assessing finance charges. And this is the detail of what the system is going to do. And this is my batch ID, RM finance charge 10,000. And for all of these past due balances, these are the finance charges. So now, if I go into receivables batches, my mouse wasn't responding. I can see, here's my batch, and if there are any transactions in there that you do not want to go to a customer, you could simply remove them from the batch. So here are all my transactions, and it shows me. So I have final say on whether or not these finance charges get assessed on a customer. Maybe you've had a phone call with them and you don't want them to be assessed. So I can select that finance charge and I can click delete and remove it from that batch. And then the remainder of the finance charges will remain in the batch. Okay. So it's automatically creating a debit memo on that customer account, which then can show on their statement if you send them a statement. Okay. GP allows for you to track and calculate commissions. And in that process, you have an option whether to pay commissions on fully paid transactions, pay commissions after invoices paid. So what my system is set to do is calculate the commission regardless of whether it's been paid or not. If I were to check off this box, it would require that invoice to be fully paid before my commission transfer will show that commission due for the salesperson. So we'll take a look at that commission transfer. Again, that's up under Sales Area Page, Routines, and Transfer Commission. And so it literally is just going to look at the setup on your customer accounts. Who is the salesperson? There is a salesperson setup window over here that will say what is their percentage on sales. So I see this here. Lynn Jensen has a 3% sale commission. And when I entered that invoice, I associated that salesperson. So now I'm going to transfer, and I want to transfer in detail so I can see every single transaction that this commission is compiled of. Now what this doesn't do is it does not create the payment to the salesperson. So it's just going to show you what are the commissions that are due. And so you can see here's the salesperson. All of the sales that have happened over the past month or however often you run this, it really depends on the frequency that you want to run it, and the commission amounts. So there you have all the detail. And you could run that weekly, monthly, yearly, however you want to run that. And so you have a nice detailed report. Okay. Another item that I didn't have on the agenda is writing off documents. You can do write-offs automatically in GP, whereas you tell the system if a customer underpays by a certain amount or if they overpay by a certain amount, then you want an adjusting entry on their account. So if they've underpaid, you want a credit memo. If they've overpaid, you want a debit memo. If you don't use this process, you're manually creating these transactions. And so what we would do here is, let's say the write-off limit is $50. Very high, but my sample company, I think I'm going to have to do that, well, actually $25. And I'll say the cutoff date is 4/12. I want to preview what the system is going to calculate for write-offs. So in this window, you can see after I clicked preview, it's telling me these are the customers and these are the write-offs that I identified. If there are any that I do not want to write off, I just simply unmark them from this window. So I'm able to verify what the system is calculating for write-offs before I allow it to create the transactions. Because for write-offs, it doesn't give you that step of creating the batch and allowing you to review it before it posts. It automatically creates these write-offs and applies them to the open documents. So here I have, let's see, 5 write-offs. I'm going to say OK. And when I click Process, it's going to create that batch, post it, and apply to all those customers. So let's just take a look. We have an apply detail, a lot of different reports. GP is great with lots of reports. Okay, so here, try to expand this without closing it. We can see that it created a credit for Lawrence Telemarketing, and this is the document that it applied it against. So there was a balance of $9.37. It automatically created that credit document and applied it to the open balance. So it's really nice, easy way for you to keep your accounts up to date and not spend a lot of tedious keying trying to keep those, underpayments in control. And here's another breakdown register. And yet another register that's in summary. And you could go in and look at the customers and see what those write-offs looked like. I didn't make note of any of them, so I'm not sure which ones actually got a write-off. I do have another chat. It says, commissions, will they pay based upon what the company gets paid, or does it pay on total invoice? To me, that's the same calculation, unless I'm missing something. What the company gets paid, I'm not sure what the question is, Andy. If you could maybe clarify that. Maybe you're referring to what if they don't pay the full invoice. It does look at if you have it marked to pay the commission after it's been paid, it will only pay the commission when it's fully paid. If you don't have that marked, it just pays commission on the total invoice. So hopefully that answers the question. All right, reconcile AR to the general ledger. That's actually going to be found on the financial area page. So we're going to skip over to the financial area page. I'm going to minimize my transactions menu and go down to routines. And so you can see financial routines, and financial routines has reconcile to GL. And in 2010 you have payables and receivables as options, and we're going to select receivables. And since I've been in this window before, GP knows that for receivables I need to reconcile to this account in my general ledger. If you have multiple accounts, receivable accounts, you can just continue to add them all here, and the tool will look at all of the accounts that are set as accounts receivable control accounts. So I have my date range. Let's say I ran my aging and it had a specific balance, and then I looked at my GL and there was a variance. They're out of balance. They shouldn't be out of balance. So I'm going to come in and run this reconcile to GL, and when I click process, what it's going to do is it's going to pull all of the transactions that have been posted to the subledger and populate the left-hand side of the worksheet. And then on the right-hand side, it's going to populate all of the GL postings that have happened. And it's going to do its own little tick and tie and match up those transactions that match. And then it's going to identify any transactions that might have happened that did not hit one place or the other. So you can see on the screen here that we have an unmatched transactions section, and there are no unmatched transactions. Let's say there was an AP transaction that got posted to the subledger, but then the posting didn't happen on the GL side. You would see the transaction on this left-hand side, but you wouldn't see the relating entry over on the general ledger side because it wasn't yet posted to the general ledger. Or on the other hand, if you created a journal entry that went to the general ledger control account, which I'm going to show you a way to prevent that, then you would be out of balance because of that journal entry. Journal entries won't flow back to the subledger. So it's really just going through all of the transactions that have transpired for the period that you've set in that window and matching them up. One thing to note, these balances do not always represent what your reports show. I've had a conversation with Microsoft about this. It doesn't make sense. So this is really just a tool to identify if you're out of balance, where you're out of balance. And if you're not sure, if you haven't run your aging for a long time and you're now just trying to reconcile, you can keep running the trial balance to the GL each period and find the period where you go off and then run this reconcile to GL for that specific period. And that should be helpful to you. So if we look at on accounts in GP, and I just want to pull up the accounts receivable account. You can notice there's a lot of accounts receivable in this sample company. Let's just assume we have one. Notice this box here that says allow account entry. We recommend you uncheck that for control accounts, for your AP account, for your accounts receivable account, because you really don't want to be allowing anyone to create a journal entry against that account. By unmarking allow account entry, that is what it's preventing, creating journal entries. It's not preventing transactions coming from the subledgers, from sales order, from receivables, from a cash receipt entry. It's not preventing those types of entries. It's preventing journal entries against that account. So we really recommend you unchecking that so that you're preventing, you're ensuring that there's less of a chance of your aging becoming out of balance with your general ledger account balance. Okay, let's go back to our sales area page. And again, under routines, we're going to look at statements. And in statements, you can have several different formats set up and saved. And you can see we have 3 in this sample company. I'm going to select the blank form because I like the format. You may want to play around with that a little bit. And you would probably describe your statements a little better than just blank form. You may have, a specific type of customer gets one format and another type of customer gets another format. So under here, address ID, this is your company's address ID. Which company address do you want to use? I'm just going to use my Fabricam primary address. The form is on blank paper. There are other forms that you can try out. And it's just going to include all of these options and what date you want to print your statement to. Summarize. If you want the data summarized to a certain point and then the detail, you could do this. It will just summarize the prior month and then show the current month's activity. And then if I want to have a cutoff date of 2/15, I could also enter that date in. Probably the most challenging part of this statement window is the print for area. You can mark multiple options in here. And so you can see if it's blue, it's been marked. So the best advice I can give you is try this statement several times before you're ready to actually send it to customers to ensure that you like what is printing on the statement. So a popular option is just print past due balances and current. So you can exclude fully applied payments. And so what I'm going to do is just print it for past due and current period. There it is, I was looking for it. Current period balance and past due balance. Over here I can print notes on the statement or take them off. And I'm just going to select all customers, so I'm taking out the range. There's also an option to email these statements so that you don't have to print to paper and then stuff the envelope and mail it. I'm going to print it for today because I don't have emailing set up here. The subject line, if I were emailing, would say statement, and I can say statement from Fabricam so that when they receive the email, they'll know what that is for. I'm just going to put this to screen and click print. And when I click print, it wants to know, do you want to save the changes to the statement? Well, yes, I do, so that I don't have to make those changes again next month. And this is the out-of-the-box statement from GP. It has your company name, the customer's company name, those notes that I mentioned that you could have print or not. And here are there's the transaction activity and an amount due. And down at the bottom, it actually moves the data across the aging period so that they know what's past due and what's current. So several different ways that you can set up this statement. So again, this was just the blank form for current period balance and past due balance. So just play around with the settings, see what you like. Just keep printing it to screen. You can modify the report and add your logo by going into the report writer and maybe moving things around. You can turn off these messages if you don't want them on your statement. The other piece, if you're using emailing statements, there is one setup that you need to do, or two I should say. In setup receivables, you need to make note of who is going to get the list once you've sent the statements. Who is going to get that listing of these statements were sent? Typically it's the person who's sending the statements. So I'm going to put my name in there so that if anyone emails a statement, I'm going to get a report that shows we emailed a statement to ABC customer. The other item is that you need to have your email address set up on your customer. So on your customer here, under Internet, you need to have an email address down here. And that will allow you to email your statements. Okay, we're running low a little bit on time. I want to save time for Q&A. One more item I want to show you, and that is closing the fiscal period to prevent users from posting back to a period that you've already set to close, or you've already printed your financials. So tools set up company and fiscal periods. I'll give you a minute to take down that path if you're not familiar with it. Tools, Setup, Company, and Fiscal Periods. And what this allows you to do is a quote-unquote soft close. And you can see some of these modules have a checkbox in them. That is to say, okay, I've already processed everything for March in sales and receivables. I'm going to check this box. Now if any user tries to post to that period, they're going to get a message stating they can't post to that period. It's already been closed. So it prevents the numbers from getting changed after you've distributed your financials. Oh, and back on the customer email, that's a good question, Stacy. I should have mentioned that. There are two places for email. For emailing statements, you put the email address in here. For all other email functionality that just came out with GP 2010, this email button here looks at this email address. I'm hoping that in a future release that they just merge those two, but if you're doing the standard email statements, it is this address here. And on adding the logo, you would go to Report Writer. And if you've not been in Report Writer, I wouldn't suggest you play around with your live reports unless you have a little bit of a review from someone who's been in Report Writer. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to unmute everyone. And so if you have a question, feel free to ask.
At least in our version 10.0, is most of the stuff here that you were talking about? Most
Yes.
of it was familiar.
Yes. All of the things I talked about here today, there's really no difference from 10 to 2010. Did I answer all the chat? I think someone has me on speakerphone. I can hear my voice coming back. Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, we'll end for today. I do have one more PowerPoint screen that we have some upcoming events. Next month's webinar is the historical inventory. I'm going to mute everyone again because it's really coming back. Okay, so next month we have the historical inventory trial balance, the HITB webinar on the 20th. In September we have our Dynamics GP user group meeting, and that's going to be at NAPI Distributors in Gorham or Westbrook. It's right on the line there. And that's a very useful meeting where customers get together and discuss ideas and maybe share some troubleshooting ideas or best practices. And then in October, we're going to have a webinar on how to prep for an audit. So keep up to date with all of that by going to our website, tidestonesolutions.com. And we will be posting this webinar up to the website later today so that it'll be available to you to run through. Maybe something was a little too quick for the webinar, but you can always listen to it over and over again on our website. So again, thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate you attending, and let us know if you need anything in the future. Have a great day.